My parents sold Grandpa's house behind my back. While I was speaking at a book conference, they filed the paperwork, forged my name, and told the world I let it go. But they missed one page. Just one. Buried deep in a file Grandpa registered years ago. A cultural clause. It said no sale was legal unless I signed in person. Their $940,000 deal collapsed. But what I found in the walls, that shattered more than money. Stay. This house remembered what they wanted to erase. Hi, I'm Annalise. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about what happens when silence runs in the family until someone decides to break it. My mother, Claudia, said I was too soft, that I wouldn't fight back. She wasn't wrong about the silence, but she had no idea what was buried beneath it. Before we begin, where are you listening from right now? Germany? The UK? Have you ever lost something that was yours, but no one believed you deserved it? Drop a comment, because in this house, every voice matters, even the ones they tried to erase. Welcome to the Disowned Diaries. The gravel crunched beneath my boots like memory trying to speak. I hadn't been back to Nuremberg in nearly 7 months, at least not to this street, not to this house. Grandpa's house. From the outside, it still wore the same green shutters he painted himself every summer. Still had the small cracked tile by the left corner of the step. He used to say it gave the house character. But something was off. The mailbox. A new nameplate, polished and flat. Claudia Routh. My mother's name. Not mine. Not Grandpa's. My hands went cold. The keys I'd always kept in my coat pocket suddenly felt like they didn't belong to this door anymore. I stepped inside. The smell hit me first. Lavender disinfectant and fresh white paint. Sanitized. Hollow. Like a memory that had been bleached. The living room, once filled with soft stacks of Grandpa's books and his mismatched cushions, now had boxes neatly stacked along the wall, each labeled in blocky handwriting. Spenden. Archivieren. Verkaufen. And then one at the bottom. Annalisa. Prüfen oder entsorgen. Check or dispose. My throat tightened. That was my shelf. My shelf, the one Grandpa built me when I was 8 because I kept hiding books under my bed. No one should ever feel like their thoughts need hiding, he said. Gone. A voice floated in from the kitchen. Oh, you're here early. My mother, in a cream blouse and the kind of pearls she only wore when she needed to look respectable. I would have tidied more, she added, as if this were her home. Early for what? I asked. She smiled lightly. We've been staging the house. There's a buyer. Great offer. Over market value. $940,000. Can you believe? I could barely breathe. You sold it? She sighed as if I were being difficult. It's too much for you to handle, Annalise. All this upkeep, the taxes. Your grandfather didn't leave a formal will, and you're busy with your books and your conferences. He told me this house was mine. Well, verbal promises aren't legal, dear. You know that. No, I didn't know that. Not like this. Not when the writing on the boxes already said what they thought of me. My fingers clenched around the key in my coat pocket. I hadn't even used it. Not yet. The door had been unlocked. Maybe because they never expected me to come back. She walked past me, adjusting a crooked frame. A photo of Grandpa, replaced into a sterile silver square. The warmth was gone, scrubbed clean like it had never belonged to anyone but her. I didn't cry. Not yet. But in the study, I found the old desk, the one that still smelled faintly of cedar, and in the last drawer, behind his old fountain pen and the cracked glasses he never threw away, was something that didn't belong. A folded envelope, my name in his handwriting. I didn't open it. Not yet, because that would make it real. And something told me, this wasn't just about a house. It was about what they thought they could take quietly, and what he made sure I would find, loudly, even in silence. I sat with the envelope in my lap for nearly half an hour. The air in Grandpa's study felt thinner somehow, like grief had sucked the oxygen out of it. The desk lamp still had the same yellow glow, but the silence, it was different. It wasn't peace. It was warning. When I finally opened the letter, his handwriting spilled out like breath I hadn't realized I was holding. If they sold the house, check the signature, and check the date. You weren't in town. Grandpa. I read it 3 times. My fingers trembled, not from sadness this time, but something sharper. Anchored. The papers Claudia had left on the living room table were still there, inside a pristine white folder, as if legality could be polished. I flipped through. Contracts. A signature. Mine. Only, I hadn't signed anything. Not then. Not ever. I dug into my coat pocket for my phone. The screen lit up with the date, May 13th, the same date on the document. But I wasn't even in Germany that week. I had been in Ghent, presenting at a European publishing conference. I had the confirmation emails, the flight receipts, a photo of me on stage. Claudia had forged my signature, and she had timed it for when I was physically, legally absent. I backed away from the table slowly. My body moved on instinct. Down the hallway, past the coat rack Grandpa used to hang my scarves on. Into the small library room, his room. There, above the fireplace, hung a framed certificate, a preservation letter from the Nuremberg City Heritage Office, confirming this house as part of a protected kulturerbe district. Grandpa had told me once, with quiet pride, "It's not just a home. It's part of something older. That's why I added the clause." Clause? I turned the frame over. 4 tiny screws held it in place. In the kitchen drawer, I found the small red screwdriver Grandpa used to fix everything from chair legs to wall clocks. The screws gave way with a reluctant click. Behind the certificate, a copy of his handwritten will, faded but intact, was taped to the backboard. There, in black ink, next to his signature, "This house may not be sold under any trust, proxy, or power of attorney unless Annalisa Routh signs in person, witnessed by 2 non-family parties." I whispered it aloud like prayer. In person. It wasn't just sentiment, it was legal. A clause buried beneath bureaucracy, the kind no one noticed unless you were looking for it, unless you were him, unless he knew. And now I did. Outside, a car door slammed, Claudia's voice muffled, laughter, but all I heard was a pulse rising in my ears. She thought I would find memories here. She didn't expect to find resistance. I stood, folded the document carefully, and tucked it into my bag. Grandpa hadn't left me a fight. He left me proof. The silence was no longer comforting. It was strategic. I left the house through the back door, the clause folded neatly between 2 old postcards in my notebook. I didn't want Claudia or anyone seeing me carry it. The street behind Grandpa's property opened into a quiet path lined with chestnut trees. As a child, I used to call it the listening road. He told me secrets belonged here, not because it was hidden, but because it didn't echo. I called Ellis, my godfather, Grandpa's closest friend, and someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Annalisa?" His voice cracked like static, but the warmth was instant. "I found the clause," I said. A beat. Then, "I was wondering how long it would take." Ellis invited me to his flat near the old city wall. He greeted me in his usual wool cardigan, holding a chipped mug of black tea. No sugar, same as Grandpa. He didn't waste time. "She forged your signature, didn't she?" "Yes." He nodded once, like it confirmed everything he'd suspected but never said. "You know why she rushed the sale, don't you?" he asked. I shook my head. He leaned back. "Claudia's in debt. Severe. A string of failed ventures. The buyer's offer wasn't just timely, it was bait. She needed the money fast." I swallowed. "But she could have told me." Ellis's eyes softened. "She didn't want to ask. She wanted to erase the part of the story where you were the rightful heir. That's always been her talent. Rewriting memory." I sat quietly, tracing the rim of the teacup. "I don't want a war." "You don't have to want one. he said. "She's already fighting it." He handed me a small black flash drive. "Grandpa recorded everything. Copies of the kulturerbe clause, audio notes, and one conversation you'll want to hear." I plugged it into my laptop. The file was titled simply, "Claudia, March 12th. I hit play. Her voice filled the room, sharp, controlled. "We don't need her. She doesn't want this place. She never did. Once we file, she can't undo it. The clause? It's buried in a drawer somewhere. I'll handle it." Ellis paused the recording. "She didn't think you'd come back." My chest burned, not with rage, but with betrayal fermented so long it no longer had words. Ellis said something then that landed like a stone in still water. "What they took from you was never just brick and wood. It was proof you belonged, and they tried to sell that without asking." I nodded slowly. I thought I had returned to reclaim a house, but I was beginning to realize this was never about a house. This was about voice, about lineage, about silence, weaponized through paperwork and politeness. And now, about truth. The next morning, I woke up in a haze of clarity, like my body had slept, but my mind had kept marching through every room of Grandpa's house, turning over every silence they'd tried to bury. Ellis had given me more than evidence. He had given me intent. That changed everything. I spent the morning drafting an email. Attached were 4 files, a scanned copy of Grandpa's preservation clause, a notarized confirmation of my presence in Belgium on May 13th, the full recording from the flash drive, a written statement requesting a halt to any property transfers due to legal irregularities. I sent it to 3 recipients, the buyer's law firm, the Preservation Board of Nuremberg, and Claudia. No threats, no drama, just facts. At 2:17 p.m., I received the first reply. The buyer's firm. "Pending legal clarification, our client is pausing all transactions regarding the property at Routhstrasse 11. 2 minutes later, my phone rang. "Claudia." I didn't pick up. Instead, I returned to Grandpa's house, with my own keys. I walked straight to the library, lit a candle, and opened the window just enough to let the autumn breeze stir the pages of the old Nuremberg archives he kept stacked on the shelf. The ones no one ever touched but him. And me. A text buzzed on my phone. "Claudia, you've embarrassed me. After all I've done for this family." I didn't reply. But I remembered something Grandpa once said when I told him I felt invisible. "They can't shame you when you're the one holding the light." That evening, I visited the office of a local journalist who specialized in cultural heritage fraud. I didn't give her names, just a question. What happens when someone tries to sell a house with a preservation clause illegally bypassed? She raised an eyebrow. "It depends on the buyer, but if it was knowingly hidden, it could escalate, especially if it ties to city grants or cultural misuse." I handed her the folder, anonymized. "You'll want to look at the sale price." $940,000. She whistled. "That's not a family dispute. That's a potential scandal." I didn't want revenge. I didn't want headlines, but I wanted them to feel what I felt, that there are things you don't get to erase. Not with white paint, not with new nameplates, not even with silence. The next morning, Claudia sent one more message. "Let's talk. We can fix this." But I wasn't interested in fixing what she never admitted breaking. I was interested in finishing what Grandpa started, a house that remembered, and a name that would no longer be silent. The city's preservation board responded faster than I expected. By Thursday morning, a formal notice was posted to the metal gate in front of Grandpa's house. "This property is under investigation for breach of cultural protection law, 7B/2, sale without authorized heir consent. All transactions are suspended pending review." It wasn't dramatic. Just a laminated sheet of paper taped with city seal at the top. But to me, it landed like a siren. By afternoon, 2 things happened almost simultaneously. First, a letter arrived, hand-delivered, from the buyer's attorney. a withdrawal of purchase interest citing compromised legal foundation and public perception risk. Second, Claudia showed up at my flat. No pearls, no blouse, just a brown coat creased at the sleeves and a face stripped of performance. She didn't ask to come in, just stood at the door and said, "You didn't have to humiliate me." I looked at her, really looked. For the first time, she didn't seem powerful. She seemed cornered. "This wasn't about humiliating you," I replied. "It was about telling the truth. Quietly." She scoffed, but her voice was low. "You could have come to me." "I did," I said. "You just didn't hear me when it wasn't convenient." Her eyes flickered. She wanted to speak, defend, reframe. But the documents, the clause, the recording, they'd done what words never could. "I'm not here to beg," she said. "I know." She looked over her shoulder, then back at me. "The house was never about you." And that was the first honest thing she'd said. I closed the door gently. That weekend, the journalist I had spoken to published a quiet, well-researched article. No names, but the facts were unmistakable. A protected property, a forged signature, a nearly €1 million deal collapsed because one silent heir didn't stay silent. Within days, people began stopping outside the gate. Not many. A couple with their toddler, an old man taking pictures, a woman sketching the shutters. The house had become a story again. Not theirs. Mine. Ours. Inside, I began restoring small things. The shelf Grandpa built me, pulled out of the donation pile. The rug with coffee stains I refused to throw away. And in the corner of the library, I placed a small brass plate with words Grandpa once wrote in a letter. "Legacy isn't what we leave behind. It's what we protect while we're here." I didn't need an apology. I needed this place to breathe again. And somehow, even after everything, it did. It took almost 3 weeks for the city to officially nullify the attempted sale. The Preservation Board issued a public statement. All conditions of cultural inheritance must be honored. No transaction shall override the in-person consent clause embedded in the property's original designation. It was the kind of sentence that would mean nothing to most people, but to me, it was the difference between being erased and existing. I didn't celebrate. I cleaned. I spent quiet mornings dusting off Grandpa's books, refolding the linen curtains, brushing fallen leaves off the windowsills. I bought fresh paint, not new colors, but the exact same green he used on the shutters. I repotted the rosemary plant that had somehow survived on the back porch. One afternoon, I sat on the steps outside with a mug of lukewarm tea and watched as a woman paused at the gate. She looked to be in her 50s, brown leather bag, a camera around her neck. "This was your grandfather's house, wasn't it?" she asked. I nodded. "He let me and my husband stay here once during a storm," she said, smiling gently. "We were strangers then, but he gave us soup and a blanket and said, 'All storms pass faster if someone sees you.'" I felt my throat tighten. I remembered that line. He used to say it when I had bad dreams. She placed a single carnation on the gatepost and left without asking for more. In that moment, I realized he hadn't just left the house to me. He'd left me a map of how to carry things that aren't always visible. Later that week, I wrote a letter, not to Claudia, but to myself, to the version of me that once felt like a placeholder, an afterthought in her own family's story. "You didn't imagine it. You weren't overreacting. You weren't dramatic. They tried to forget you, but you remembered yourself." I folded the letter, slipped it into the shelf Grandpa made me, behind a copy of Der Steppenwolf. Let the next person find it when they're ready. The house didn't need to be loud to speak, and I didn't need to prove anything anymore. Claudia didn't return. There was no confrontation, no last blow, just silence. But this time, it was mine. 3 months later, I hosted a small reading group in the library. 8 chairs, a circle of strangers, tea in chipped cups. Someone asked why I chose to stay in this house after everything. I smiled. Because some homes aren't just made of walls, they're made of memory, and memory, when protected, becomes proof. They tried to erase me, from the papers, from the porch, from the story, but the house remembered, and so did I. Now I wonder, have you ever been written out of something that should have had your name on it? An inheritance? A conversation? A memory? Not all betrayals come with shouting. Some come with silence, calculated, quiet, legal, but silence doesn't mean surrender. If this story touched something inside you, share it, even if it's just one line, a moment you've never said out loud. You never know who's reading, and maybe someone else here is still searching for their proof hidden in the walls. Drop your thoughts below, and if you're still carrying a story like this, there's another one waiting for you. Let's make sure the truth doesn't stay buried.